Hello everyone and welcome to episode 53 of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined in conversation by Sarah, an award-winning author and a host of the Give a F*K podcast, who guides those seeking to reconnect with their souls, creativity and Mother Nature. Sarah and I had so much fun connecting. Whilst we talk about important topics, it's done with a gentle hand and a lot of laughter, a true tonic for the soul. Sarah shares her deep love for nature, which provided her with a sanctuary and place of safety as a child, and which she has now returned to in later life, having reached her own tipping point or dark night of the soul. We talk about how we can't all do everything, but we can all do something, and how with this mindset we can understand the importance of community, the need for tolerance and compassion, so we avoid falling into the grooves of division that are becoming deeply ingrained into our cultures, particularly when elections fuel and fan the flames. Sarah encourages us to remember that nature isn't a place to go, it is inextricably linked to us. That we need to listen to the ancient stories that Mother Earth is literally breathing into us, that are etched into our very beings. She shares the idea of considering time on a greater scale. Where were we 7 generations ago? Where will we be in 7 generations' time? How does this shift how we view ourselves into the world and our priorities, and how to move forward in respectful co-creation with the earth and each other, whilst remembering to focus on the future we want to embody rather than the fear of what we don't want to happen. Welcome, Sarah, and thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you today. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fun and there's going to be a lot of laughter. But just to get started, I always just ask my guests to share a little bit about their nature story. So that can just be anything about how you've related to nature throughout your life, any fond memories, or just anything you want to share about how nature's been important to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Fiona. I know we are going to have a super fun time, and there's definitely going to be a lot of laughing. So this is for all of your listeners. I hope they laugh along with us. Yeah. So my nature story, I feel like almost I have to get back in like the Wayback Machine and go back to like age 4 or 5. And the house that we lived in at the time, there was this bush that grew in a circle. And, you know, being a little kid, like the spot where the circle came together, I could kind of duck in and go inside this bush. And it was almost like this magical portal to Mother Earth and her consciousness. And it was amazing and beautiful. And then we moved to another house when I was like almost 5, maybe closer to 6, but somewhere in there. My parents made this decision because they wanted my sister and I to have our own bedrooms. God forbid you should consult the child who's now ripped away from her magical portal into the earth. But anyway,
you were like, I'd rather have the bush than the
bush
bedroom.
My own bedroom, exactly. I don't mind sharing a room, but I need my bush. But I was also being sensitive. I was also like supremely quiet as a child. Like I barely spoke to my parents when we were at home alone, never mind in public. So there was no way at that point in life I even had enough of my own voice to say anything. So we go where we go. And, you know, when I lost that bush, it honestly became much harder for me to connect with nature in quite that same way. And then, you know, as you grow up and you get older, there's all of these societal expectations and parental expectations and teacher expectations of who you are and who you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to show up in the world, most of which are well-intended, but not necessarily actually aligned with the truth of your soul.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I got really off track for a really long time. And by the time I was 30, I was divorced twice, and all of my work, like coworker type friends and my boss, who was like a father figure to me, everybody was leaving through not because of me, but just because reorgs happened and people changed jobs and like they were just doing their lives. the timing wise for me, it was like, oh my God, all that is left of my life is this desert wasteland and everything sucked. Full truth, there was days I literally stayed alive because if I did not stay alive and I made the choice not to stay alive, there was no one to take care of my cats. And
Yeah.
my cats are my
Oh,
children and they mean more to me than anything.
yeah.
They have always been first. They will always be first. And so they quite literally kept me alive. But that was kind of the dark night of the soul that some spiritual
Yeah.
people refer to, right? And
Yeah.
I had to figure out, well, how do I get out of this and what's my path forward, because existing
Yeah.
like this is not acceptable. It's just not.
Yeah.
And it set me off on this spiritual journey that led to learning Reiki and getting trained in some shamanic stuff, and eventually it all came back to nature. But what I learned in all of that process was you don't have to get inside of a bush to actually be connected with nature. Although that is still my preference for sure, right? Like, let's be real. But you can bring a plant into your house to
Yeah.
connect with nature. There are still ways. Is it as meaningful for me as being inside of a bush? No, very honestly, there is a large part of me that still is trying to figure out how to nurture that piece of me that wants to be the little girl in the bush. I am still trying to figure that out. But what I do know for sure is, however you figure out to connect with nature, in whatever degree, extent you are able to do so, whether it is just bringing a plant in your house, or whether you are lucky enough to have a bush or a tree you can crawl inside, or anywhere in between on that spectrum, whatever you do nurtures your soul, and in nurturing your soul nurtures Mother Earth, and it's a mutual healing cycle that just goes on and on and on and on. And the only way forward, the only way out of climate change, the only way out of war, the only way out of poverty, the only way out of all of this stuff that, at least in America, it's like the world is freaking falling apart right now. The only way beyond
I think it's mirrored in a lot of places. I think obviously you
yes,
guys have got a big magnifying glass on it because you've got
the
your elections
election.
coming up.
Yeah,
We had elections earlier this year, so
yeah,
we sort of had
yeah.
a similar, not quite, we're not quite as
It's not quite as
yeah. You guys do it bigger and
harshly
better, shall
divided.
we?
Yeah,
Shall
well, I
we?
mean, we're a huge country, so everything has to be bigger and better, right? So like the only way forward out of all of that is to go back to Mother Earth, because she is the mother of all of us.
Yeah.
She's the mother of all life on the planet. And the only way forward, the only way that is truly healing and truly blessed. I don't care who you vote for. I mean, I kind of do, because one of the candidates literally wants me dead and one doesn't. So I kind of do. But putting all of that aside, the only way forward is for us to go back to our mother, to Earth. And if we all do that, it elevates all of humanity, it elevates all of the planet. Is it going to be fixed overnight like a magic wand? No, of course not.
No.
If only, right? But it changes the tide.
Yeah.
And if we think about the 7 generations concept, like many native cultures in the US thought about, if we think about that, 7 generations prior to now, we didn't even have cars. What if when we were inventing cars, somebody had thought about, what might the impact of this be? 7 generations from now, if we're able to start making the shift of going back to Mother Earth now, 7 generations from now, we can't even fathom how much better things will be.
I think that's an amazing. I've not had a guest mention that before, and it's kind of giving me chills, because I think sometimes we get so caught up in like everything that's happening now. Like it doesn't feel like there's, we forget that there's anything other than the now kind of thing, don't we?
Right.
And to think, I mean, I similarly think in time scales. Like I call it tree time, and I've got this gorgeous big oak tree that I spend a lot of time with, and I'm like, he works on like hundreds of years cycles, like
Right.
they're like, by the time they get to 100 years, they're barely reaching adolescence. And
Exactly.
and it's quite important to actually, to sit for a moment, and with that idea that you've just said, well, like 7 generations ago, we didn't even have cars. Like actually amazing propensity for advancement and development, yes, we have sort of stepped astray in terms of what we focused on, but if we can refocus, like the ability of that we have for creation is actually quite huge.
It is huge. And that's not to say we should get rid of technology. Okay. Like I am I cannot live without internet. I cannot live without modern technology. I definitely do not want to live without indoor plumbing and electricity, right? I appreciate all of these modern advances. I don't drive a lot, but I appreciate the fact that I can hop in my car and go wherever I want to
Yeah.
go. I'm not saying we need to roll back those. There's a way to do it and have it be side by side. There's a way to do it that we are cognizant of, okay, if I take this trip, what is that doing? And is that worthwhile? Is that a fair trade-off? And if it is, what can I do to maybe offset the impacts, right? There's ways to think about it. There's ways to do it that we don't have to give up all of these things that matter to us in modern capitalist society. Like I said, I appreciate them too, right?
Yeah. I think that's important, isn't it? It's because one of the things that you're quite passionate about is like sort of ancient human stories and ancient wisdom.
Yes.
And there is people do sort of how do I say this? Like they kind of want to ignore that because they're like, well, you're suggesting that we do like, turn back the clock and we go without like indoor plumbing and, electricity.
Dear God, no. God, no. No. Absolutely not.
Healthcare advances.
Yeah, no,
like, it's like,
I don't even like camping. Okay. So there's no way I'm going without that.
And but this is the thing, how they kind of divide you over it, don't they? They go, well, you can't, you can't have both. You've got to sort of go, well, it's like one or the other, and it's not that at all. And it's like, we can use that information and learn from it and bring it forward and retain the good aspects, the useful aspects, and also use them to our advantage. Like technology can be useful, it can help us, we can move forward with things. And but it is, I think it's what you said earlier, it's about like healing and coming back to us. And that's where I found that the connection with nature is really important, because it's like if you can connect with what sort of the natural world, whether it's plants or animals, things that perhaps you don't immediately, they can't talk back to you in the way that connecting with a human can. It's like you can connect with humans in a completely different way as well. You connect on this energetic level that is, I don't know, it's a skill that I find you sort of learn in nature, really, I suppose.
Well, and that's the irony of this, right? They try to, people who think like you and I, they try to segment us off, right? And it becomes yet another us versus them dynamic. Every election is an us versus them dynamic.
The polarization and division.
Right. And as we were saying, America right now is this humongous, just gross example of this, but it's division. Even our courts, as much as yes, I believe in law and order, and yes, I believe that people who break laws need to have consequences to those. Our court systems are even set up as an us versus them, right? But the irony of it is, in nature, when we really get back to understanding how nature works, there is no us versus them. Yes, there's predator versus prey, but that's not coming from an adversarial standpoint. That is a survival standpoint. So it's very different, right? And prey animals don't kill just to kill. They kill to survive, and that's it. And predator animals don't kill just to kill, right? And I said that backwards. And prey animals are equipped with other ways of surviving, right? They're not just at the mercy of the predators.
No, they're not defenseless. Certainly, I mean,
they're absolutely not defenseless.
If you've seen a giraffe or a buffalo, even turn on a lion,
right? Well, I'm even thinking smaller, like a mouse, right? Like everybody thinks cats hunt mice, eagles and other birds of prey. They hunt mice, right? Humans, we don't want them in our house. I'm with you. I don't want them in my house either, right? They are not invited, but they have other ways of surviving, right? Yes, they're providing food as part of the food web, but they also have ways of continuing their species when we stay out of their way and we let nature do what nature does. One of those ways is they have about 12 million babies a year, right? So that some of them have this opportunity to keep going, right? It's how nature is set up to work. And so for me, it comes back to, like you said, like the ancient stories. And what I mean by that is literally the stories that Mother Earth is breathing into us all the time, if we would just shut up and listen. Right? It's literally etched into our very being. There's an image that I just today shared on my Facebook that shows like the tree of life and how it's basically identical to the human placenta. It's you were talking about your oak tree, right? It's the rings of a tree and a thumbprint or any fingerprint, right? It's the veins of a leaf and rivers and our own veins. And they all look the same. Look at mycelium also, right? Under the ground. That is also our veins and our nerve endings. And it's not like nature is a place to go escape to. We literally are. We are nature. We embody it, and we are inextricably connected. There is no way for it to be an us versus them with nature, but we've tried to set that up. It's always been in America, it's conquer the West, right? And it's, conquer. No, it's not about conquering. It's about working together and being harmonious. And that's going to look different for everybody, right? We have to make the choices that are aligned for us and our lives. And for some people, maybe that does look like you go off grid. Cool, more power to you, right? For some people, maybe that is changing your diet. For some people, it's taking up a more activist mantle. They're all good. They're all valid. I say all the time, we can't all do everything. That's impossible. But we can all do something. And every little thing that every one of us does, it adds up to a humongous difference for Mother Earth.
Yeah, and I think that's important to realize, because I think when you care about nature and the environment and people as well, because it's like they go hand in hand, it can feel really overwhelming, and you can have this sense that you've got to try and do everything and like fix everything. And
been
actually
there.
Yeah. It's important to remember, it's like, well, like if we're talking about like our homes quite a lot here, and it's like, well, if you have a problem with the plumbing, you call the plumber. If you have a problem with electricity, you call the electrician. And it's realizing that like we all have individual areas of expertise and inspiration and like we don't have to do everything, but we perhaps have to do something, and then we have to come together in community and work together. And you mentioned the mycelium and the trees, and it's like, this is the lesson that we can learn from nature, is how we can all work and play our part and be in harmony in this sort of web of existence, instead of where unfortunately our society has taken us. I've had quite a few guests over the last year where we've talked a lot about what world views and how basically we've ended up at the point where we are now, where we've become separated. We've tried to exploit and dominate nature and seen it as lesser, and we're superior, and it's having that superiority complex has allowed us to exploit both nature and also other human beings, unfortunately. And it's just important to realize, you don't have to do everything. B, there are other people like me and Sarah in the world who are like, we're on the team with you as well. And to try and not feel that sense of overwhelm. And I think also you talk quite a lot about how you felt a real like rage as well about it, and do you want to share a little bit of how you kind of have dealt with that? Because I think that's an emotion that a lot of people probably have experienced.
And I have to say, so I don't know how many of your people are into the astrology thing, but I will just throw out there that I am a Scorpio with 3 planets in Scorpio, so rage is like my go-to. And so I'm continually having to go, okay, feel the rage. Like, it's okay to be angry. This is upsetting. What is happening is not okay. And it is okay to be pissed off into every cell of your being. I get there still very often. But then what do you do with it, right? Be angry. Hit, yell, scream. Don't hit people, but hit a pillow, yell, scream, punch a punching bag. Then you got to let that go and figure out how to channel it, right? And so for me, I channel that rage by starting my business. I look for other people like you and me, Fiona, to join my sisterhood who are of like minds and want to make a difference, but also need a safe place to be like, I am so pissed off about this, right? And with people who understand, right? Are we going to agree on everything? Of course not. We're people. We're not meant to agree on everything. That's part of the deal, right? We all do have our own beautiful skills, right? And it's funny that you said that, because I was screening to be on somebody else's show, and she kept asking me, but what do you teach in your course? And she wanted like bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4. But that's not the way my course teaches you to find your own
You.
special thing. Right.
Yeah.
Your own. I give you a bunch of information and a bunch of guidance, some of which you may already know, some of which may be new. That's the point, to help you go, oh, this is the thing that I want to focus on, and this is the way that I want to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm not teaching, it's not like I'm teaching you, here's how to be a great photographer, bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not saying those aren't valid. That's not my course. And so this, obviously her asking me that, it was like, well, this is not going to be, the right podcast for me, because you clearly don't understand that what I'm teaching is not concrete.
So you came to me and I'm like, yeah, I don't even do questions.
Yeah.
Like,
Fiona's
we're just
like,
going
well,
to
you're my
free flow.
soulmate. So yeah. She's like, you're my soulmate. We're fine. But that's it, right? And it's not meant to be for everybody, right? Like, is there somebody who probably could teach something similar in a much more concrete way? Yes, and please do, because we need that voice too, right? There is enough. When we get back to Mother Earth, there is enough abundance for all of us. There is enough beauty and joy and peace for all of us. And we need all of those voices and all of those ways of showing up and all of those ways of talking about it to make that happen. Because the way that I present it is only going to speak to certain people. It's not going to speak to somebody who wants bullet point 1, bullet point 2, bullet point 7. My brain don't work that way. And that's not to say I'm not organized. I'm hyper type A. But the way that I show up as a teacher is not to give you very concrete steps. I will give you steps, but they're still fairly like nebulous. Like, find your way of doing this, find your favorite this. Because to me, that's what makes sense, right? But other people want, first you adjust your zoom to 2 point whatever. Like, that's fine. They're all valid, right? But we need all of those voices and those perspectives.
I think it's really interesting. I was like, as you was talking, I was thinking about like how we're educated, and I was thinking like we're not really educated to be like free thinking.
No,
like we're
we're
educated
educated to pass a test, at least in America.
And it is, I mean, I saw a fascinating study a while ago, or one of my guests might have mentioned it, and it was about like how creative like young children are in like kindergarten, and how basically we ultimately educate that out of people.
Yes.
And it is really hard. Like, we do have this society where we feel like we have to have the answer, and we need this prescribed, like, someone's going to ask me a question and I can answer it, and then like everything's going to be good in the world kind of feeling. And
don't get me wrong, I want to have all the answers all the time too, but the fact of the matter is and the thing is we actually do, but they're not the way we expect them to be, right? Because nature is us and we are nature, and all of the answers are in nature, but they don't show up necessarily in this way that we have been taught answers are supposed to arrive, right? They show up as metaphors. They show up as just this deep knowing that you can't explain and can't justify. And that pisses people off when you can't justify it, right? They're like, well, you're crazy. Why are you doing that? That doesn't make sense. Well, it's what you know is right. Go with it. Everyone else be damned.
Yeah, I watched an amazing TED talk probably close to a decade ago, and it was about he's a scientist, and I can't for the life of me remember his name, but if I do, I'll put it in the show notes for people. And he was basically talking about like he was really sad by the fact that when did science become used as a reason to say things were impossible? And he was like, the whole point
Right.
of science was basically, to be like, well, how do we prove that is possible rather than saying, well, we can't prove it now, so
It's not
therefore it
possible. Right.
doesn't exist. And I was like, I just thought that was amazing because I thought, yeah, it's like that's what science should be. We should like be observing things and go, oh wow, that's amazing. I can see that happening. Like, but we don't understand how. Like, how can we find out how? And it's about sort of pushing forward and understanding more. And I think that's the thing with like what you're saying is it's like we can divine for want of that's quite a woo-woo word actually that just came to me, isn't it? But
Yeah.
we can divine these like you know feelings, I suppose, for some people, but sort of inspiration, intuitions, and we can't fully explain them at this point now where we stand, whether that's because we don't have the technology or we just don't have the information. But that doesn't mean that we can't follow that idea down that path and see where
Right.
it can lead us. And
Exactly. Well, I mean, let's not forget, we used to think the world was flat. Then we understood it wasn't flat, but we thought that all the other planets and the sun rotated around us. Now we know that all the planets rotate around the sun. Like, science evolves as
yeah.
technology evolves, as our understanding of the universe evolves. We get new questions, and we are supposed to use science to try to answer those
Yeah.
questions,
Yeah.
right? Not to disprove it because, oh my God, that might upset somebody next
Yeah.
door, but to literally be like, okay, well, there's enough people who are anecdotally talking about whatever it is. Auras, let's say, just to pick something super wooey weird, right? There's
Yeah.
enough people talking about them. Is there a way to accurately prove or disprove
Yeah.
scientifically whether or not they exist? And maybe right now there's not because we don't have the technology. Okay, can we invent the technology? What technology might be needed, right? Like, it's supposed to be an exploration, and we need those voices too.
Yeah.
People sometimes who are in tune with nature and maybe a little bit more on the wooey side of things sometimes feel like, well, I don't trust doctors and I don't believe in medicine. And this was a huge thing during COVID, right? And
Yeah.
to me, while I don't necessarily in my own life want everything that modern medicine has to offer because I have some medical trauma and whatever, I also recognize there is a place for it, and it is another way of people showing up and using their gifts. The problem is we've tried to institutionalize it and regulate it and take it out of nature and into a laboratory. When the fact of the matter is, a lot of the stuff they're creating in the labs can already be found in nature. They're just
Shh,
trying
don't
to
tell
quote
anyone.
unquote improve on it. Quote unquote improve. You can't improve on nature. You can try to replicate it so that you don't destroy the rainforest in trying to save humanity. Yes, like, let's do that. Improve on it, maybe not. Right? And
Yeah.
but don't tell them. Probably the cure for cancer already exists in nature somewhere. We just haven't found it yet, or we have found it, but we haven't figured out how to recreate it in a lab and therefore institutionalize it and capitalize on it.
Well, I was going to say that's the other point, isn't it? Is the capitalization on it and
Mm-hmm.
profiteering off of it, and
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, it is just it's really difficult.
Especially
There's
in America,
yeah,
where, you know, I mean, I get that there are goods and bads to socialized healthcare, and there are goods and bads to privatized healthcare. As somebody who has only lived under the privatized healthcare and hasn't had health insurance in a long time because it's stupidly expensive and covers nothing, I wouldn't mind trying the socialized thing.
yeah. I mean, the healthcare system is really difficult, and I think it comes back to this whole like our whole society, like we need to find a way to like unpick it and unravel it
Yes,
and find, because everything is so interlinked. And I think like in this
yes.
country, obviously we have a public health system and we're constantly being told it's broken and it's underfunded. And
Which it may
in
very well be.
and it is broken, but I think unfortunately it's not broken in the way that most people perceive it to be broken.
Mm,
And I think it's broken in the sense that health has been separated from every other aspect of our
ooh,
society and life. And
yes.
and it's like, you can't, how do you help people maintain health rather than how do you just treat people when they become unhealthy? And
Exactly.
that's
Wellness should
yeah,
be the first thing, right? It should be not, oh gosh, you're sick. Now let's try to make you better. It should be, how do we keep you from getting sick in the first
yeah.
place? Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the real struggles with our society is that we have kind of siloed all of these aspects, and healthcare is actually a great example of that, of like how, our the way our bodies are treated by doctors and things have all been siloed. You go to specialists who specialize in,
Right.
one part of your body, and then it's like, and then when you have things that, affect different areas of your body, then it gets really complicated, and it's
Right.
it's
God
very
forbid we
difficult.
remember that it's all connected and it's
Yeah.
all one system, right? But you're right. I mean, it is but this goes back to what we've been saying, right? We are nature. And in nature, everything is connected the same way. But we've tried to institutionalize nature too, and well, it's okay to take down the rainforest because it only affects the rainforest. Well, we now know that ain't true,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's all one system, and we are a piece of that system, and it's living and breathing, every bit of it, rocks included. It's all a living and breathing system. And so it comes back to, well, how do we care for that as part of caring for ourselves?
Yeah.
Because that's the only way forward,
Yeah.
regardless of who wins whatever elections in whatever part of the world. And yes, I definitely have my preferences because on a very realistic level, one candidate literally wants me dead and one does not. And I am admittedly incredibly nervous about that. But regardless of who wins, this work of getting back to nature has to continue.
Yeah.
Now, maybe I have to find a cave to continue it from in order to remain safe. I don't know, but it does
I
have to
think
continue.
I had a guest whose conversation I've is going to get released quite soon, and she's an author in the UK, and she has a great new fiction book called Any Human Power, and actually
Mm,
in that she looks at the the whole like political system is based in the UK, so it's our sort of political system,
sure, yeah,
but it
but
was really
America's is based on it, so
but it was really interesting, like, because she proposed like basically a way to like unravel the system from within the system.
oh, I
and
love this.
and it's really, I don't want to give too much away because I would recommend going and reading it if you can, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's really interesting to be like, the problem we have is you can't expect the system to like recreate itself, so we have to find ways to kind of work within it and slightly
Within it to
shift it.
change it. Yeah,
And it is just, I think that's what's really important, and I think that's what I love about your work, is that you're like, by encouraging people to come back to nature, by encouraging people to reconnect to who they are and what skills they can offer, it's like
right.
you are helping people to start to like realize that actually there could be a different vision for society.
Right. And they don't have
And
to be trapped in the
yeah,
way that it is. They can do that change from within piece that she probably breaks down very differently, right? It sounds like hers is a much more step by step thing, whereas mine is much more creative, I guess we'll say, right?
yeah,
Like, but we need both of those. We need both of those. Like I actually just released a poetry book called Unity, that was inspired by the fact that what I perceive as happening in the American election right now is this battle between divine feminine and male ego. And
yeah,
regardless of how you gender identify, regardless of what gender you were assigned at birth, male and female exist within all of us. They it's yin and yang. It's all right there. And literally right now in America, we are being asked to make a choice. Do we want to rise with the divine feminine or continue to allow the male ego to suppress us? And so in getting that kind of eagle eye perspective of it, I wrote this unity book that again, I'm hoping will inspire some people to go, oh, well, I can change my vote, I can do XYZ thing to help create change, whatever it is that speaks to them. but it's again for the creative mind, not for the I need a very logical process mind.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
it's important as well to remember that like we still need to work within the systems that we've got. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I myself, like during the UK election, was, I got to a point where I was like, I actually, it's really hard to cast a vote because I don't really want
Yeah.
any of them.
Mhm.
But it was like, I need, you do need to, sort of try and move the needle within the circumstances that you've got
Yeah.
at the moment and participate fully and work,
Yeah.
work outside the systems where you can in local areas and local communities, but
Absolutely.
also work with the systems that are there and improve
Yes.
them and help them move in the way that they need to. I mean,
Exactly.
I've had a couple of guests talk about things like rights of nature and them they're trying to rework the like legal framework so that there is
Hmm.
this, legal precedent that can be used in the courts of law that will support
Right.
nature in a way that it
Yes.
currently isn't in the
And there's
legal
some
system.
really cool stuff coming out of the UK with all of that and declaring different aspects of nature sentient. I actually did a podcast episode, I don't think it was that long ago, about the animal sentience and how
Yeah.
we have to question, is it even okay to eat them? Is big ag okay? Where do you draw the line? Because these are now, if these are sentient beings, like where is that line? And I also talked about it in terms of Star Trek: The Next Generation and Data because they talk about sentience on there as well, and I'm a huge Star Trek fan. But like it is when you decide and are able to scientifically prove the sentience of anything, it brings into question, and it
Yeah.
should. And
And
this is
it's
why
yeah.
science is important. It's an important part of this dialogue and an important part of this process.
Well, and I think it goes beyond that as well, doesn't it? When you actually start to think, well, you look, some of the newer research that's coming out around plants even and
Mm-hmm.
trees and their degree of sentience and communication,
Mm-hmm.
caring for each other
Yep.
and the mother tree and all sorts of interesting things. And I think, I mean, my take from that is it's actually just about taking a step back and having respect for everything around you and your part in that. And it's, and just being respectful, I think, isn't it? It's about,
Yeah.
this being back in balance, not taking more than you need. We've got into
Right.
this real sort of capitalist mindset of, hoarding
Yes.
and
Hoarding
and
and
but some of that has an emotional element for a lot of people as well. There
it
is
does, but a
this,
lot of it comes back to fear, I
yeah.
think. You're
Well, and
afraid that if you
disconnection,
don't
doesn't
hoard
it?
it.
Disconnects you
Right.
from the world around you, from that sense of belonging, because that's a
Yes.
big thing for people is having, we have this innate need to belong, and
Right.
not just to like our human sort of companions in the in this journey through life, but actually to
Right.
the greater world.
To the
And
greater whole,
yeah,
right? To the greater cosmos. Exactly. And I loved what you were saying about plants and the mother tree. I've been slowly reading Women Who Run with Wolves.
oh yeah,
And so I kind of just pick it up and like read the chapter that I feel I need at that moment, right?
yeah,
I don't feel like it's something I need to read in order, although most things I do. But this one I picked it up and I read the chapter where she's talking about community and connection because that's something that on a very like interpersonal level I really struggle with. I'm an introvert and I'm sensitive and it's very hard for me to go out in the world and find people who get me. I find you in the UK with Fiona, but I don't have you down the line, right? And so she's talking in that chapter about how she was transplanting some lilac bushes, like a whole hedgerow of them,
yeah,
basically. As she's digging them up, there was one that was dead, but she didn't want to just like separate it and dig it out until she saw what was going underneath with the roots because she understands there is this interconnection and there's the mother tree. Well, turned out the dead lilac was in fact the mother tree, but it
um,
was still feeding and connected to the rest of them. So she just transplanted the dead one right along with the rest
yeah,
of them because
yeah,
it's the mother tree. If she was to pull that out, dead or not, the rest would die. Right.
yeah,
And it's that level of respect, right? She's not she's not going to not transplant the lilacs because she needs them to be where she needs them to be for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. It's her yard.
Yeah.
But she's also saying, how do I do this in a way that is respectful of the plant? How do I do this in a way that honors the fact that this plant is also connected to me and I am connected to it, right? And so I thought that was really cool that she actually did the digging first to go, you're dead, but you're integral. You're necessary. Maybe you only look dead to my human eyes. We'll move you too. You know?
Yeah, I love that. I had I guess I had last year. She's got a lovely retreat and holiday property where people can stay in
Oh,
the
neat.
Pyrenees in the south of France. And she has a gardener who works there, and she wanted to do something, and the gardener just said to her, "Have you asked permission?" And he
Mm.
meant of like the land
Of the
and the
plants and the
plants,
land. Yeah.
and he was just like, "We'll ask permission." And then what she wanted to do would never happen.
Yeah.
But it's that sense, isn't it, of like actually being in like co-creation with the
Yes.
world around us. And I mean, I love gardening, and it's just, but it is co-creation, because you can have
It
like, oh,
is.
I'd like you to live there, and the plant can be like, well, actually, you know what, I prefer it over there, so I'm off. I'm like, I'm going to
Yeah.
seed
Yeah.
myself over there, and that's going to be my
Thanks so much
patch. And
anyway. Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, and it's just, I don't know. I mean, I find it exciting and exhilarating. I love talking to people like yourself who just get it. And we're like, wow, this
Yeah.
is
No, I completely understand because we're not exactly like your next door neighbor most of the time.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but I love that, and I'm going to expand out what you just said about co-creation because there's a lot of focus on some like in spiritual circles and even not spiritual circles about the whole law of attraction and manifesting and this and that. But it's not manifesting. You can pray, wish, meditate, whatever method you want to use to have something manifest in your life all day long. It's not going to happen if you're not actually doing it as a co-creation,
Yeah.
right? And there are different ways to do that. I actually just developed what I think is a pretty cool ritual for this because I realized that I was kind of doing this whole, okay, universe, I want this and putting it out there, knowing it was aligned with my path and so thus would show up, but then being mad when it showed up in ways that I didn't like. Okay, Sarah. So I came I was here's the analogy. It's like saying, okay, bake me a cake and then being pissed off when it's not the cake you wanted, but you've given no direction and no
Yeah,
ingredients.
someone made you coffee cake when you wanted chocolate or something. Yeah.
Right, or whatever. Yeah. And so I've realized what I have to do is I have to bake the cake. I have to do all of the research, provide all the ingredients, all of the very concrete, this is what it needs to look like stuff. So if it's like a house, it has to have a garage with an automatic opener that's attached to the house. It's not detached. It has to have an entry from the house, from the garage into the house, into this room of the house. Like literally that specific, right?
Yeah.
And once I have all of that, I've basically baked the cake. I can hand it off to the universe or higher power, whatever name you want to call it, to frost, essentially, to make it happen, to
Yeah.
make it pretty, right? And so for me, I love ceremony and ritual because it brings that element of higher power in. It also is very, in a concrete way, it's very much a delineation of like, I've done my part. And now I can let go, right? I can stop worrying about it. I can stop thinking about it. I can stop having anxiety about it and staying awake at night worrying about it. And so I like that. And I'm also a humongous fan of plushies. I mean, being a children's author, I suppose that's not terribly surprising, but I'm a humongous fan of plushies. And so I came up with what I think is a pretty cool idea of for whatever it is that I'm trying to manifest, getting a designated plushie for whatever that is. And in some way it should be like related, right? So if like I'm wanting to move to a particular state or country, finding a plushie that's representative of that, right? And then I'm also Jewish, and when Jewish people, when we go to visit the wall in Israel, there's this tradition of you get a little slip of paper and you write your prayer or your wish or whatever on that little slip of paper and you put it in the cracks in the wall with a blessing. And so I'm going to kind of combine that with the plushie and I'm going to put little strips of paper like this is, and but instead of like the very nebulous prayer or wish. It's literally going to be one slip of paper for every single ingredient. So if it's a big thing, there's going to be lots of strips of paper. If it's a small thing, not so many. And I'm just going to kind of place them in and around and on the plushie with some sort of blessing, prayer, ritual, whatever that's appropriate to that task. And then I can walk away. Right. And then as those things get achieved, like say it's for like a business thing, right? I can be like, okay, I want 15 new email subscribers in the next month for the next 3 months. Once that happens, we take that out and or I keep it and keep doing it, or I could take it out and replace it with a new goal. Right. But it's a way of being like, okay, I am co-creating now, rather than I am basically saying, co-create this with me, but giving you no instruction and then being mad when it doesn't work out. Yeah.
And I think that's really important as well. Like if we relate that to the current situation in regard to our relationship with the environment, and it's about, like you're talking there about you getting very clear about what you want to create. And I
Yes.
think, we get very trapped in this, like what we don't want to
Right.
see any more of, like what is going on now, what and projecting that forward of like, if we carry on this path, this is, and a lot of our intention and energy goes towards this sort of negativity, really, for it's big broad spectrum brush to brush that with, but this this sort of sense of doom, really, of like, and it is really, and I mean, that's part of why I started the podcast was, I wanted to bring together like a bit more of a solution orientated kind of vision of like, actually, well, like there are people that are already doing things. So that's like, we can see what they're doing. We can help them amplify that. We can, that helps. But also like thinking about like, what do we want to create? What do, what is this, what do we want to co-create together? What is the vision for the future?
When you could remove the thing that you don't like, but then it leaves a vacuum. And right. And the universe can't function in a vacuum. We know this from science. And so what do you use to fill in the vacuum? Right. And that's where that pause. And it's funny that you say that about your podcast is very solution focused, because although I don't as often have guests on mine, although I would love for you to come on as a guest, Fiona. I think you would be fabulous. We would have a great time.
Oh yeah, you have to share the name of your podcast, and I apologize to everyone who's sensitive.
No, I'm gonna spell it. I'm gonna spell it. So then there's no naughty words. So it's give a F asterisk K.
And fill in the blank.
Yes, exactly. Fill in the missing vowels. So, but I not every episode, but most of them, I share like, here's the conundrum, here's the problem, like the animal sentience one that I was just talking about, right? Like here's the study. We can now prove that animals are sentient, and that leaves us with all of these questions, all of these. It's essentially the vacuum now, right?
Yeah.
Now that we know this, now what? Oh my God, right? And that can be very scary and feel like a problem. We want to know things. We're humans. We want to know, and we want to know now. But I conclude with, here's how you can make a difference. Here's how you personally can take responsibility for one tiny piece of this question, of this conundrum, of this problem, right? Or we look at lawns. I know lawns are big in England too. Americans brought them over from England, and we think that having these massive green carpets is somehow the way to go. But in reality, that's not aligned with nature. That's not aligned with what Mother Earth needs to thrive. And therefore, we as humans aren't thriving. We're just working really hard to have these green lawns and wasting a ton of resources to do it, right? And so I talk about this on my podcast. Well, here's what you can do personally. Even if you don't have a lawn because you live in a place that is an apartment, or you've already replaced your lawn with something else, or whatever it is, here are some things you can personally do. And there's always options, right? Because not everything is going to work for everybody. Somebody might be all about, okay, yes, I will write 1 million letters to the editor to try to educate people about this. Some people might want to actually go out in their community and talk to people. Some people might want to start their own podcast focused on that specific thing. There's 1 million ways that you can take up the mantle of the thing that speaks to you, and it all needs to happen. All of those voices are valid.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
love that. And I think it's really important to like help people realize that, there are solutions. And I saw a fantastic post on Instagram earlier today, and it was the one of the things that really stood out to me was they said creativity is our ultimate renewable resource.
Oh, I
And
love that.
I was just like, yeah, that's it, isn't it? I was like, it's really undervalued in our
It
society.
is.
Like
Oh, so
everything in
much.
our society is like, creatives are kind of, the
You're
bottom
kicked to the
of
side. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it's like, I mean, a lot of my guests, like I've spoken to a lot of authors, poets and artists and things. It's like, they're uniquely placed with, they're already tapped into this vast creativity, this ocean
Yeah.
of possibility, and they can help people who aren't currently tapped in to start going, well, yeah,
Yes.
that what about this idea, what about this idea? And and in creativity is also in technology as well, in
Absolutely.
like innovation and advancement
Absolutely.
of that all comes from like that place of creativity. And I think when we connect back to nature, we allow ourselves this space to become more creative as well, like having that
Yes.
connection with nature where we get out of this busyness. We can disconnect from society and reconnect with this web of life and this literally like living, breathing, pulsating universe that we're a part of. Then
Right.
we can get into this place of creativity, and the ideas and solutions and things that are out there are just like that are
Endless.
already there are like mind blowing.
Right.
Really.
Well, and I love that you focus on that connection because creativity ultimately is a quote unquote feminine trait. That does not mean only women are creative because remember, feminine and masculine live in all of us. But creativity is generally associated with as being on the feminine side of things. There's a reason we call her Mother Earth or Mother Nature because that is also on the feminine side of things. And therefore, there is this innate necessary connection with nature in order to bring out our own creativity in whatever ways that those look like. And again, they're all valid, right? That's why my class doesn't teach you a specific recipe for how to fix things. It teaches you how to find your recipe,
Yeah.
you
No,
know?
I love that. How to find your recipe. That's
Yeah.
just, yeah,
Yeah.
I really love that. No, it's I'm gonna have just so everyone listening knows, if you want to find out more about Sarah and some of her amazing offerings that she's got courses. She is a massively prolific writer as well.
Yeah.
She's got what, well over 60 children's books that you
74 children's books,
yeah.
4 poetry books. Yeah.
It's just, someone tapped into her creativity right,
A little
right there.
bit. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
And you've got a wonderful community as well, your soulful sisterhood. So there's a lot of things that people can kind of tap into on different levels, depending on what resonates with them, what they're interested in, where they are in their own journey as
In their
well at this
journey. Yeah.
point.
And I'd
Um,
also love to, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I would also just love to offer very specifically to your listeners. If you go to my website, which I know Fiona's going to put in the show notes because she's amazing, right at the top is access to my free mini course. You'll answer 3 questions so that you can be, because the mini course is customized. And we want to make sure you get into the right level for wherever you're at on your journey right now. So you answer 3 questions and boom, you'll be enrolled in that course for you. It shows up in your email. Full disclosure, because the rules in America are different. So full disclosure, you will also be on my mailing list at that point. I promise I don't sell your email. I don't spam you. I try to send things that are of value.
and I'm sure you have somewhere that people can unsubscribe if they need to.
Absolutely. Yes,
So
of course they can. Of
yeah.
course they can. Absolutely. Yes. If you feel like it's not vibing for you, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's the same rules over here as well. So it's
Well, but
all
we don't have the whole GDPR thing where we have to like tell them what's happening. I don't know. So anyways, just full disclosure for people, because I don't ever want to be that person that is underhanded or whatever. That's not me, and that's not aligned with nature either. Nature's pretty upfront. Anyways, yes, I would love to offer that to your listeners for them to
that's fantastic.
roll in that.
And I think it's it's important as well. Like, we have these ways of staying connected, and yes, it can become overwhelming. Yes, some people do it in a bit of an icky manner, and but it's important that we have these ways to connect with people and allow people to stay in touch with us as well. So I think, again, it's reimagining and revisiting our relationships with these things and doing them differently. They're not, being on someone's mailing list isn't inherently bad. Like, it can be a really positive experience, but
it absolutely can. And that's what I aim to make mine to be. But I also just want to be upfront with people that is part of the deal when you sign up for this course, is that you're also going to be on my mailing list.
But yeah. No, and
it's definitely not intended to be icky. It's intended to be beautiful and uplifting and useful and all of that. But if you find it's not, absolutely unsubscribe.
It's not, I'm a bit like you. I'm quite an introvert, and I actually like being on people's mailings lists because I feel connected to them.
Right. Well, yeah, like you can connect to them and not talk to them ever. Exactly.
So yeah, I'm like, yeah, bring on the mailing list.
Bring on the email. Please don't contact me otherwise.
Yeah. Do not pick up the phone.
Oh my God, I don't even, unless I know who's calling, I don't even answer the phone. No, thank you. Yeah.
Which is really hilarious because we've never met each other before, and here we are sitting on Zoom recording this podcast conversation, two introverts, and we're like,
well, see, because email's a special thing, right?
But yeah, it's been absolutely amazing talking with you, Sarah. I guess we're getting to the point that we sort of probably should.
We probably do, yes. But it's been amazing talking to you too, and I definitely would love to have you come on my show as well, because fantastic. I think we would have a really useful conversation for people. So,
is there anything you would like to leave people with? Any messages on your heart today that you think would be of service to people to hear as we part ways? Although I hope we'll talk again in the future, but.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to leave everyone with a quote that is above my desk. Come forth into the light of things, let nature be your teacher. And that is a William Wordsworth quote.
I love that. Go and say it again, just to...
Come forth into the light of things, let nature be your teacher.
It's just beautiful. I don't even want to say anything beyond that, because I just think it's the perfect sentiment that, to let nature be our teacher. I think there's just so much wisdom there that we can tap into, and it can be as simple as that. So thank you so much, Sarah. It's been an absolute
Fiona. This
pleasure.
Has been amazing. Yes.
My cheeks hurt, actually. I'm just laughing and smiling so much. And I hope everyone has enjoyed this conversation as much as I think both of us have. And please do look Sarah up on all of her links that we'll have in the show notes. And and hopefully we'll have you back again soon as well. We can talk more, because I know there's loads more we can talk about.
I would love that. Thank you again, Fiona.
Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends, leave a review on your favourite podcast player, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.